Okay, today I'm going to talk about something that is not incredibly easy to talk about, and that is admitting when you done effed up. So, I am learning from this book here. And I did not realize that in learning Moonlight Sonata, I was actually getting into some tricky stuff with accidentals, and I'll go into what those are in a minute. So, originally, I go, okay, I've had music before. I just have to look at the key signature, and there is one sharp there. And I was like, okay, key signatures, sharps, I got this. The sharp is on the space for F, and so F is sharp. This is true. However, despite prior band experience back in middle school, there was a few things about sharps that I did not realize. And it made a difference. So I also encountered double sharps, and I was like, what in the is that? So I did research, and that is where I'm gonna say I done effed up. So I'll go into exactly what I learned so that maybe I can spread the knowledge. Like the notes I took in my notebook, I'm just gonna do like a little clip to it. Okay, so this is part of my notebook where I'm taking all my pursuings of knowledge online through YouTube and reading up and distilling what I learned into this. So, in short, a key signature is some sharps and flats that will be right next to the clef that tell you when notes are going to change for the whole piece. So this right here is on the F line, so that means Fs are going to be sharp. And that means all Fs are going to be sharp no matter what octave they're in. So whether it's like a lower F or a higher F. And then in this one, you see multiple flats are indicated for this key. So these notes right here are just talking about how to tell the name of the key, which is a little more advanced, and don't worry about that. What we want to do is right here. So an accidental is a sharp or a flat occurring next to a note, and it is carried through the entire measure. So this would be a measure right here up to that line right there, and then up through this line here. That is also a measure. So this is the key of F sharp, so this F will be sharp, and the next F would be sharp. However, it's got a little natural sign next to it, so that changes that note. But what you have to remember, and this is what I messed up, is it carries for the entire measure. So these are then made to be natural until you get past that bar, and then it turns back to a sharp. So it reverts back to its normal state. So these are like, you know, in video games when you get like a special status, like, you know, 200 power up on your hits, but it only lasts for 30 seconds. Well, this is the music equivalent, and it only lasts for one measure. So sharp, natural, and flat, those are the accidentals. Is the key will apply to both octaves, or any octave, like however high up or low up you go. When there is an accidental right next to the note, it only applies to that octave of the note. So this is the key of C sharp. So this C and that C would be a sharp, but that one has a natural. So any of this lower C for a measure will be natural. And this one remains unaffected. It will be a sharp, just like the key signature says. So these accidentals that are on the note itself, it's only for the measure. Okay? And another little note, they're always written to the left. And the other thing about this, which I think accidentals carry through the whole measure. They are not repeated on tied notes. So in this example I drew down here, this is tied. So instead of it having a flat here and a flat here, it's just understood. And if these were just regular notes and this one was the flat, like these were normal, then this would only say it on that first note. It wouldn't say it on any other notes in the tie, unless you got to the end of a measure and it, you know, went across the measure, or if you had the next line of music and they more do it to help you keep your place on what the note should be doing. So if this G natural was tied to another G and it went down to the next line, they would mark the natural sign again so that you remembered to do natural. They're also not repeated for notes unless one or more notes or rests intervene. So that means if we had like a natural here and maybe like a D or something here, and then we went back down, they might repeat it for you so that you didn't have to remember to, you know, carry it for each note in the measure. Oh, or if a rest comes in there because it breaks it up. There's a courtesy accidental, which means it's just a reminder. For instance, here we had a regular G, there's no key signature. There's a regular G, then all of a sudden it's sharp, so it's sharp again. They don't repeat it. And then this is a courtesy natural to remind you that that's the normal note. So that's in parentheses. And again, these are all called accidentals. And that is a courtesy accidental. Okay, this is what blew my mind because I did not remember seeing any of this in band. The double accidental. So the double accidental raises the pitch by 2 semitones or half steps. I'll go over the half steps in another video, but essentially a half step would be like a G to a G sharp, and then G sharp to F would be another half step. So a whole step would be G sharp to F sharp, or G to F. And the double flat is the same way. A flat is like, you know, F to F flat, it's like half a note. And then F to F flat to E, oh, that's a bad example because there's no black key for that. Okay, so let's say we were doing A. If you had an A flat, that would be a half step, and then if you had A flat to G, that would be a half step. So it's just one note down or half note down. Whole step is a whole note down. So that's all the double sharps are. It's kind of like doing 2 steps. I kind of don't see the point, but that's where you're at. So a sharp, which looks like this little guy here, when it's a double, it turns into an X. So I encountered this in Moonlight Sonata, but I read about it right before I encountered it in a forum online. People were joking, well, LOL, come back to us when you see the X. And I'm like, what are they talking about? And then I saw it and I was like, oh. Okay, so double sharp. This is a single sharp where one of them has become a natural. This is getting like more complicated. But the point is what I already explained, where it's kind of like going down a note or going up a note. And then if F's are sharp in the key signature, you have an already F sharp, you're going to write it like this, but it's still only going up a half step to G. So I don't know if that really makes sense, but it's how they do it. So if you have a double sharp, it's going to raise it by a whole step, but if the note is already sharp, like this guy here, it's really only going up a half step. So that's your tutorial on incidentals. accidentals. It's accidentals, truly. It's accidentals. So I took a few days off of my piano playing for the reason of being a little discouraged that I have to redo what I thought I knew and write the notes in again, but the right notes, and see how far off it was. And I didn't want to practice what I had written before. I needed to make sure I thoroughly understood it so that I could go back and write it in. So I took a few days off of playing piano, but I did keep up with one of the apps that helps you memorize the notes because I'm still a little on that. But one of the things I wanted to say is when you make mistakes or you have accidents, if you can recognize them, that is really the biggest step and a sign that you're learning, because we learn from our mistakes. To err is human. Human. To be dead is also human. And case in point, I'm going to use an art example. So I did this picture of a friend of mine. She was making a super goofy face, and originally I felt really proud of it. I don't usually work in realism, and I thought the eyes came out really good, but I still have a problem. So the neckline is really jacked up. It's very dark. It's all like a dark kind of line, and it looks unnatural. And the chin area, it made her look old, and I tried to fix it, but I couldn't really fix it with ink. And originally I'm like, okay, well, I'll just sort of like darken the line here and cut the profile the way it needs to be, and maybe it'll be good enough, but it wasn't really. And I also saw that I gave her old face. And that was a lesson in picking out what shading to use, what shadows to use when you're adapting from a photo to an art form, where it was information that was there, but it was too much for this level of rendering. So yeah, that was a mistake, and I learned from it. And later in the second picture, I actually I found a white ink pen, and I kind of cleaned it up, and I feel a lot better about it now. So my point is, I made mistakes, but I absolutely learned from them, and that is invaluable. Oh, and the other thing I did is I went in and I added more detail and value, like dark shadows and stuff to the hair, which it was sort of like cathartic to add a little something original past just trying to correct my mistakes.